Welcome everybody, this is the second part in the 2D tile map tutorial. I'm using the same code as before. I'll go ahead and hit play to show you what it does again. Both of our, or all three of our tile maps are using integers as values for the tiles. What you want to do is you want to get away from that and store them as objects instead. So what we're going to do first is create an object. We're going to go to our project, click on add, and then click new item. This class is going to be named tile. Let's name it tiles with an S. It's a class, so make sure it's selected. Click add. Here it is. Alright, now we need to think about what properties and what variables our tiles can have. One thing I know right off the bat would be a position on the screen as a 2D coordinate. So what we're going to use is a vector. I'm going to go and make things public to be easy. It's not going to give me the vector because I need to copy over the references. So let me do that real quick. I just copy over all of them just to make things simple. Just copy and replace. Now we'll have access to the vector 2. Vector 2 is 2 float values. It's very good for coordinates to use that. So we have position. Something else that would make up a tile is maybe an ID. And it's going to be, we can go and keep that a string. Make everything public here. ID, position. How about a way to tell if it's solid? So let's do a Boolean variable. Is solid, or let's just do solid. Okay, now that should be good for our tiles. Let's go and make sure that when we create them we fill it out as well. C2R is a shortcut for creating a constructor. You just hit tab after you type it in and it creates it for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and kind of mimic our values up top. I'm going to name the same thing and I'll show you why. Just to make things easy, the way we differentiate between something is sent to the method in here and what is referenced up here is by using the keyword this. So this dot position is equal to position. That lets the code know to keep these two values straight. So position is position and this dot position is the class's position. So I'm assigning position to what was sent to the method. It's just so hopefully that's not confusing to anyone. Alright, so this defines some of our variables. That's good. Let's make another class as well. We want a class to handle our levels, so we're going to make a class and name it level. Levels, let's say. Just put an S on the end to make the naming a bit easier. Same thing, just so I don't run into any trouble, I'm going to copy over the using from tiles into levels. Alright, now when we think about a level, we probably want to have a name for it. It's not necessarily necessary, but let's go ahead and do that. String name. What else would a level have? Well, a level would have those 2D arrays that we defined earlier. So let's go back to our game 1. See these integers? They would make up a level. So we're going to use it as a framework. We're going to change it around a little bit. So let me copy it and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, first off, we're not going to use integer anymore for a value because we just defined a class called tiles, an object we can use. So rather than being an integer, we're going to put tiles. It can hold a lot more data that way, a lot more specific stuff. Just leave it blank for now. Alright. Now since we put the is solid or the solid Boolean variable in our tiles, we don't actually need it specifically a collision layer So the only thing is we have a background and foreground. There's really no need for a collision layer because that information will be in the tile itself. Now, one thing we probably want to consider, let me go and put the constructor real quick, just type it C2R and then tab. We're going to want to load the levels. It's very important that we do that so we don't mess anything up, so let's go and make that a requirement of the constructor. Now, we're obviously not going to be passing tiles in because our stuff is set up with the integers in the beginning. This part is going to depend on how you want to load your files and how you save your files. For this just being an example, let's go ahead and just keep it to integers. So I'm going to show you what I mean here. What we want to do is we want to pass in a background and a foreground, but this time, same as before, we want it to be a 2D array. Foreground layer. Alright. Now if we were actually loading this from a file, there's probably a better way of doing it. Again, this is just an example. We're going to pass two 2D arrays with integers, and we're basically going to turn that into two 2D arrays of tiles so that we can use our level object that we're going to create. Let's see, let's create another method here to actually load a level. Let me think about how I can do this. Okay, I know. So what we'll do is we'll have it return the level. So the method is going to be of type 2D tile array, a type we defined, and let's say load level. Now what we need to pass into the level is an integer 2D array, level data, let's say. Oops. There we go. Okay, so now this method is going to return, and that's why we're getting an error down here. It's saying, hey, not all code paths return a value. That's because I haven't used the keyword return. Return something, it would get rid of the error. For now, let's back up a step and start to make our calls in game to replace what's up here. We want to do that in the load step. So I'm sorry, let me go ahead and define, we can do right here, level. Let's say levels, level 1. Oh, that'll work. So now down here we're going to say level 1 equals new. Now remember, this is a class, so in order to instantiate an object you need to use new, the new keyword. That tells the compiler to create a new object. So we hit tab, it'll kind of do it for us here. Now it's telling us we need, remember that constructor, we need a 2D background layer and a 2D foreground layer. Well, thankfully we have that. So let's pass both of them. Now we have our new level. Now, when the code hits this line, it's going to go to here, the constructor. It's not going to do anything else because we haven't told it to do anything else, but we did pass our 2D array. So let's go and finish it out. Load level is going to return our tiles, which is what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this dot background layer. It's going to be equal to, now remember, since this returns the tile 2D array, which is what we need, we're going to put load level, and it's asking for a 2D int, which is what we provided it, background layer. There. So now assuming we read the level correctly, this will provide a proper 2D tile array to the background layer tile array that we want. So we need to do that again for the foreground layer. Foreground. There we go. So now we need to actually work on the loading of the data. If we go back up here, we see that we have a lot of integers and that sort of thing. So what we're probably going to want to do is we're probably going to define rules for the ID and match it up. Let me think. We're going to want to parse through the 2D array. So an easy way of doing that now would be to go to here, because this is a good example of how to do it. I'm just going to copy it over to make things a little bit easier. Okay, this is going to allow us to parse through the array. Now it's not going to be named correctly because I took it from somewhere else. So, but essentially this is going to be that background layer, and we're not displaying it to the screen, so we don't need that line. But this will allow us to parse through it correctly from the looks of it. Okay, so we need to define it to do something when we reach this point. Let's see. We're dealing with level data. When we're referencing the 2D array, I'm trying to remember, y, x. Remember, don't mix it up. Y, x. So it's going to be y, x. Alright, now this is the integer. Okay, sorry about that. I've made a couple adjustments to the code here just to figure out the best way of loading the level. One thing to make a note of what I did was I created a tile width and tile height set to 32 inside the level class. Same as the main class, but since we're now putting in the levels, there won't be any need for it to be in the game part. It can just be in the level part. Now, under public tiles, you should probably notice this stuff is new as well. What I did was mainly this line right here and this line up here is important. So in order for me to return a 2D array of tiles, I first need to define a temporary tile map, and I need to let it know it needs to be as big as what I passed, the level data y and the level data x. So it lets me know how big to make my 2D array based off the 2D array that I sent in. Alright, now this right here, though this line says is the temp map, which I already defined the y and the x, like how many it could be. So according to the y and x position of the level data that I passed in, we're going to fill it out in the same order, y, x. We're going to be equal to new tiles. First we need to create the position, remember our constructor from before, position, then string ID. We convert what the y and x is to string, same as we did in the past tutorial, and then bool solid, and I just set it for true here as an example. Now, in order to get a little bit more granular and have more control, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another method. This method is only going to be called within, so I don't need to make it public. So it's going to be a return type of tiles. It's going to be named, I'm just going to name it tile, and the only parameter it's going to have to be passed to it is the same thing as a tile, really. Vector2 position as well as string ID. Yeah, and that's it. Everything else will be figured out. So let me make a thing right here. Temp tile map y, x. This is going to replace what's above it. Equals tile, and it needs a position, which I want to pass to it as this. And the ID, which I'm going to pass to as this. Alright, and then I'll take this line away, so we don't need it anymore. So same as before, we're going to do a tiles temp tile. Then we're going to set temp tile equals new tiles. We passed our position already, so I just need to put position. String ID we already passed. ID solid is true. Actually, we don't even need to do temp tile. We can just return new. Sorry about that. Now the whole point of me doing this was actually to allow me to specify based off the ID whether or not a block is solid, that sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on ID case, and it's been a while since I worked with switches, case 1, well, 0 is possible, so 0. Break. There we go. Alright. If we pass the 0, then it's not going to be solid. So, we can keep everything, but this is going to be false, because that is solid. Now remember, we have 1 through 5 as possible, so the rest of these are going to be solid. Oops, I'm sorry. True. Let's see. One is going to be the only one that's solid. Okay. 1 is the only one that's solid. The rest is false. One is solid. Okay, in that case, I can just use default. Oh, I don't know if it's case default or default. Okay, it's just default. False, true, 1 is true, break. Okay. And both those will return tiles, so there shouldn't be a problem with the method. Now I need to go back to my game and look at my collision layer. This I want to put in some 5 just as an example. Some 5s and some 3s. This will really only be useful when we start to do the movement and such, but go and get in there. We're just going to delete the one up here. Remember, we only have a background and a foreground. There's really no need for a collision layer because a tile can hold both data in it. There you go. Alright, so I'll pass to it both those and fill it out. Well, there's another thing that I should do too for tiles. Remember in the game 1 there was a rectangle that defined it? That is important. Rectangle. Alright, that'll give me all sorts of errors down here because I did not include it. This is going to be self-defined, and I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so if we go from game 1, basically what we're going to do is we're going to be defining the rectangle. Instead of in a dictionary, we're going to define it in the actual tile itself. It's kind of a better way of doing it. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to paste. Alright, so we know we're going to need to do this each case at a time. It's good to go and keep default in there, but we do need to define everything. So let me just do that. Kind of want to keep things in order. You don't have to. 3, 4. We're not going to actually store the image in the rectangle itself. It may as well keep that separate in the game. You can of course do what you want, but I'm going to do that just to keep things simple. Okay, 1 is going to be equal to this rectangle, so let's just copy what's in it. Alright, 0 is going to be equal to this rectangle. If it's 0, it's false for collision. Two down here. Copy that. Alright, now 3. Okay, it's just one number, I don't need to copy it every time. 4, 28, 5, which is 160. Yeah, I hope I got that correct. So now I've just defined all the rectangle according to the image that we had before in that dictionary. Okay, I was complaining because it doesn't have a default. I do want to keep a default in there just in case of any errors, but basically it won't return any rectangle, which means nothing would actually appear on the screen. That's safe for a default though. Alright, so now we should have accessible background and foreground layers. I'm going to go ahead and make this public in case I need to represent for the main class. Okay, let's see how that changes game 1. This should be not necessary. We'll delete it, but for now let's just leave it in there so it doesn't bug me with any errors. Let's go back to our original draw right here. Now, rather than put all this code in the game, it would be best if this was handled in the level data. The level should be responsible for updating the tiles as well as drawing them to the screen. So, let's do down here public void update. I'm just going to follow the same naming that the normal game would do, with one exception. Under draw, it's going to take a sprite batch. That way we can just pass the sprite batch from the draw command to here to make things easier. We'll assume the sprite batch begin and in has been called, but other than that we can do our draw calls. Notice that sprite batch lowercase s, so it's not the same as capital S for sprite batch. It's just slightly off of the name to make it a variable and not the actual name of the class. Just keep that in mind. I don't want it to trip anyone up. Alright, so its responsibility is going to be able to draw the tiles from the background, so I'm trying to think if the tiles themselves should be responsible for drawing themselves or the level itself. Let's do it where the level will draw it. You could also do it where the tiles themselves draw, just add an update and a draw and call it, but I'm going to leave it up for the level for now, for to do the drawing. So we want it to parse through. It's going to be the same thing as game 1, the background layer first. It's named the same, so we won't have a problem there, background layer. We do have a problem here because there's no texture. So the easiest way to get by that is to pass the texture along with the sprite batch. Just name it the same and we won't have any problems. We won't have to rename it or anything. Alright, so that's going to be the same. This is the position on the screen. Remember how I said to reverse the width and height? However, if you remember correctly, I had stored the position in the tile itself. That means we should be able to do this. Remember, it's y, x when we're referencing stuff from it. Remember, position is a texture, a vector 2, so it satisfies the requirement for that being a vector 2. Now this, what it's looking for is a rectangle. Same thing that we did with position. Remember, each tile stores its own rectangle of the image it's supposed to be, so we can just do that. This should produce the same thing as game 1. We'll see if I made any mistakes with the typing, but it should work. And it'll be the same for this. Just a different name for the layer. Foreground, 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 YX, YX, both of those, so should be good. I actually need to do anything with the tiles for now, so I won't call update. I'll just leave it there. I do need to call draw from game 1. So in between begin and end, don't forget level, what is it? Level 1 dot draw. Remember, it wants a sprite batch. Alright, now the tile texture 2D, which conveniently we named it the same thing, so it's not too hard to figure out. Now with any luck, this should work. Great, excellent. I'm a little surprised it worked the first time. That's good. Alright, so as you see, you see the blue in the lower part of the screen, that actually showed up, as did the yellow, which was different from before, because we updated our 2D array. Each of those things, rather than just being a number, is now a tile object. Just to recap, we look here, each one has a position, ID, a solid, and a rectangle. And our level is what's responsible for not only updating the tiles, which it doesn't do anything yet, but it can, and drawing the tiles. It goes through the array, which we defined as a background or foreground, and looks up. It uses the tile texture that we pass, and it uses the position of the tile and the rectangle of the tile to display it on the screen. So this is the nice thing about using objects instead of integers. The nice thing about switching our type to objects is that we have access to so much more. If I put a period here, you'll see I have a rectangle I can get from the object, the position I can get from the object, the ID from the object. If I wrote methods, I would be able to access methods from the object itself. That's so much more than I can do from just an integer, where I could just get an integer value or a string if I converted it. So hopefully you understand what's going on here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to answer them.